So 23, right? Second season on staff at Devs. First season on staff with Pulse, right? Continuing the streak and everything like that. Anything about your first season, full-fledged staff member, you have a little bit of experience now, right? To go off of. Anything about either of those seasons that you want to talk about?
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like you'll kind of start to see like the common trends of like how I approach it. But I think like just going into 23 for Blue Devils, like was very much, or I guess let's start with Pulse. I think Pulse comes first to that degree. Cause that was my first time teaching indoor, before my second year on staff of drum corps. So like that time too, like I kind of knew, and also like the same way that John and Ian kind of brought me on staff, they also were starting to incorporate me more as like kind of like writing too. So I've been kind of helping to write like some of the quad beats and things like that, and like the quad solos. So doing some of that, and then also working on Chino Hills as well, doing that as well. They kind of knew that I wasn't going to do as much of the back half of the season because I would spend more time with the high school and doing those things. So I think a lot of like the early season I spent with Pulse. And so like a lot of that time I was really trying to help to guide them and trying to get them on the same paths and trying to help the section leaders and things like that at the time, try and approach it from a similar mental state, but also trying to help them to see their own problems and like figure out and work through whatever troubles they have, but being able to openly communicate that and just talk about it. So I feel like 23 in a sense, they definitely like, that was a super talented quad line. Like they were very good from the get-go.
We're talking 23 Pulse.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, man, that line was stacked.
Yeah, it was fun, man. It was crazy. It was just really fun to like work with those students and like, and luckily too, like it never actually did feel that weird for me to like be teaching people that I'd marched with, because I did feel the degree of separation of being like, no, it's business time, and also being like, also you guys know it's business time. Like we're all here to work together, and also like I'm here to help you guys see the same like sorts of results that you guys looked up to for the new guys who just made the line, and then also for the vets to kind of continue on that same standard of excellence, trying to fill in the shoes that were left before them. And I feel like it was one of those things. I feel like everyone learned. I feel like they went through it the right way, and it kind of felt crazy all the way to the end. It was definitely not. It's not always easy, but also with that, you just kind of take it point blank. You just see what it is and hit the next one. Going into Blue Devils 23 as well.
Not a rookie anymore.
Not a rookie staff member anymore. I think 22, as well as helping the students figure out how to be Blue Devils as well. I feel like, and I didn't talk about this with them at all, but for me, I was really trying to figure out how to be the right staff member for them, and also just for myself, like what kind of staff member am I, like, because I've taught before, but definitely not drum corps, not at that caliber,
not at that level. Yeah,
not at that level.
It's funny because 22 during the summer, San Antonio free day, we ended up having lunch with a bunch of like the Blue Devil staff and stuff like that. And I remember going up to Brandon, because it was like I knew it was Brandon's first year, and I remember asking him like, so what kind of staff person are you? Like, who are you? Because everybody knows who he was as a performer, but as a staff member. So it's really interesting to hear you say that. Like, you do have to go through that process of like figuring out who am I in this role,
Yeah, and I think, and I was just having another conversation about that with another quad tech as well. Just kind of like, it's honestly great to kind of second guess yourself at that point and to be like, what kind of staff member am I? And also not wholeheartedly believing that just because I aged out and just because I had a really good like marching experience means that I have it all figured out, and being like that means I was more open and susceptible to whatever criticism came towards me, or just like being able to just learn from those sorts of things too, which hopefully I feel like helps to round out the individual as an instructor.
Did you ever mess up really bad? Did you ever have any moment as an instructor, either years with Blue Devils where you were like, oh, I really messed up?
I think yes. And
anything you can talk about?
Yeah. I think it's kind of funny too. Like I remember really struggling in 22, this is kind of a funny story. Scott asked me, there was like the section of the show, I think it was, we were doing the anime section of the 22 show, and Scott asked me to write a drill move. Also, I don't think I talked about this, but I was also on battery visual staff in 22. 23, I was not. But 22, I was kind of working double duty and working all blocks in front of that drum line. But Scott asked me to like kind of write a drill move out for him. And it was not an easy drill move. It was kind of like, okay, so he wanted the drum line to come out of these two lines, snares, quads, do a sort of shell game, moving like that, and then end in a double poltergeist. Yeah. Like 2 lines of like snares and quads like integrated. Yeah. And I was like, okay, let's do it. So I remember writing notes, and I couldn't figure it out. I spent so much time just just write. I had like a notebook with me, like pen and paper, and I was just writing it down, and I was like, no, this isn't it. And I remember even trying it in person one day with like the battery and like trying to work things out, and like, cause Rudy was there, everyone was like, so what do you got? And I was like, I think we could try this. And then like, I was like, this is not working. It's not great.
I'm feeling your pain right now.
Yeah.
Cause blocks are valuable. We talked about it. Right. And it's like, you're sitting there and you're going, as you're teaching it, you're going, this is not working. I just need to stop now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so what ended up happening too is like, I wrote out the move to get to the first form, but I didn't know how to get out of it. And then luckily Rudy was right there, and he was just like, what if you just started at the last form? Just did the other way. You end at the form that you started in. And I was like, oh, that seems like the answer, So like kind of just really just helped to fill in that last piece. And then I was like, whew, because I definitely wasted a bunch of time and stuff like that. That was definitely one of those funny moments. But yeah, and that move ended up being in the show still. So it was a fun one. That was one of those moments. I think besides that, like everything else was just something where I realized like after each day, I'll typically just reflect, be like, did I do that okay? Like, did I handle that situation all right?
In a healthy way.
Yeah, exactly.
In a healthy way.
Mm-hmm, exactly. Like, was I able to work through the solutions, or are they still problems? Are they consistently problems, or just like, what is that? But I wouldn't really say they were ever usually like terrible mess ups, because like usually I just think, mess ups happen, and like, you tick every once in a while, and then but it's more just like, how do you recover? How do you have a more consistent rep the next time,
In looking at your work as Elegy, is there any particular, the name?
The name it was honestly more like I wanted something to kind of just resemble my name a bit more. Sure. And also be more unique. So I did a lot of research and was like, there's no artist called Elegy the way I'd want to.
So for the people listening that don't know, Elegy is the performer, his own music, the artist, correct?
Yes.
And so in looking back at and I just like looked on YouTube and things like that at the stuff that you had put out. There was a little bit of stuff during the pandemic, or like around the pandemic time. Mm-hmm. And then earlier this year.
Yes.
You also released another little batch.
Yeah. Another little batch of songs. Probably actually almost around a year ago from now, leading into the early part of this year. Released some stuff like then. And in quarantine and COVID was really when I wanted to take, and I kind of released music under like a different name before that too. And I was kind of like that period of time was more of me kind of in the sandbox in a sense of just music and being like, well, what does this do? And what does that do? And I was also like, just kind of like doing all this work myself.
I was going to ask, are you self-produced?
Yeah, self-produced for sure.
Do you play all the instruments and then put it all together?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, playing all the instruments on all that stuff. So all the guitars, all the bass guitars, the drums that I program. Sometimes I'll ask for help, and honestly, I kind of want to get into more collaboration and things like that too. But in quarantine was really when I was like, okay, I want to kick this thing off, get it going. I was producing a bunch, did a lot of practicing, and just like production practicing, working in the DAW software, and just spending time learning what it was. And I think like I created like a completely like unique group of songs that like I'm kind of like excited to put out, and because I actually haven't put all those songs out yet still.
Sure.
And so like it's very close. It's been a very long process, but I'm really excited now because I think like those songs I put out in that last batch from a year ago until like earlier this year, those are all going to be up and coming on like a new EP I'm working on and trying to put out pretty much early next year. And so that's kind of like the early timeline, but it's been a long time in the making. And since then I've just been producing, practicing, and also just trying to position myself for the releases, and also just kind of like also just socially just knowing, like just talking with people more about what my goals are and how how I can have help to be able to do this thing to the full extent, because it's not easy when everyone kind of sees just drumline you know.
So let's talk about this a little bit, because I have a couple of these like thoughts in my head. I don't know how you feel about comparisons.
Yes.
Okay.
Let's do it.
But in terms of like your music, Frank Ocean,
definitely an influence.
really?
For sure.
Tyler, the creator.
Absolutely an influence.
Yeah. You know, I think that sort of would help give people a little bit of like, okay, that's a little bit of the ballpark, the sort of
Yes.
neighborhood, but
So-
also like the Beatles,
Yes.
you know.
So is Elegy like R&B, or I don't think that's really
Yeah,
the term for it.
it's one of those things, because like honestly it's kind of funny. I feel like a lot of artists find it hard to pinpoint their own music,
Yeah,
but
I don't think there's really a genre for it.
yeah, I do what I do know, and what I do call it right now is just alternative.
Yeah.
Just because, and like, you know, the Beatles really experimental, that phase, I was super into that. And then also like my very first concert ever was Muse.
Yeah.
So I loved like those driving electric guitars, like, and so like putting those guitars over like sort of trap beats, sometimes throwing raps, sometimes throwing singing into it, tons of Jacob Collier style vocal layers and things like that. Like I feel like all these different artists, and as I listen to more music and things like that, I'm just like, that's really cool. That's really cool. Like I'm kind of like, I feel like I'm filling the library, and like stuff you're about to hear is going to be even way more different.
It's almost like there exists a genre now that is exactly what you're talking about, which is genreless, which is artists basically saying what's available to me. It doesn't matter what era it's from or what typical genre that it's in. I'm going to take that and I'm going to create something with it. And it's like all those artists that I mentioned. I mean, even like Childish Gambino, like all of those artists, you can't say, you know, like their songs are all, they're exploring, they're experimenting, they're doing stuff. But I wanted to talk about something because, so I watched and listened to like the batch. I binged it, you know. There was a thread to me, right? That I sort of noticed. Tell me what you think of this. I felt a really strong, and this is like more like creatively, right? What the stuff was about, you know, identity, and what happens to identity when it's like, here's who I am, but then there's this other thing inside of me that I'm feeling, right? And those two things sort of clashing together. And then there's, here's who I am on the inside versus here's who people expect me to be. And then there's, here's who I am, everybody, whether you like it or not, kind of thing. It almost felt like like early on, it was very much more inner, right? And then as we got into the newer stuff, it became more of, here's who I am, you know, kind of. Is that fair?
Yes, I would say that's actually quite accurate.
Yeah.
I feel like, because the way you described it, it's actually funny because I've never thought of it like that.
Sure.
But, you know, because it's just me living my life. And also, like, I've been doing a lot more. It's funny. I've been reading a lot more like Rick Rubin stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So I feel like I've been thinking a lot more in that sort of mindset. But knowing that, like, those songs stamp a particular time frame of my life and the mindset that I was in. And even like these songs that are probably about to come out, as well as the ones that came out last year, those are all still quarantine mindset me. Mm-hmm. And like that sort of frame, that mental state I was going in. And in that time, especially when I was first doing elegy stuff, like I just said, I was practicing, I was exploring, I was trying to find the sounds, the textures that I really like. And I think more recently now, with the stuff that's coming out, the quarantine package that I'm about to put out, and everything that's going to come after that, I feel like is finally the first time where I'm most confident in myself as the artist. Because before then was like, I felt like I wanted to kind of pride myself on being genreless, but also like listening to it, even like, you know, me being my own self-critic, you know, I felt I could feel the sporadicness in a sense, and feel like the sorts of like polar opposites. But now I can kind of find the cohesion now when I listen to my own music, of just like the blends of genres that happen, the sorts of, I guess, the textures, the things I talk about, all those things, but it feels a lot more cohesive because now it feels the most like me.
Yeah.
And
Well,
it'll probably keep changing too. Like this is where I'm at right now.
And it has real purpose. I mean, people talk about authenticity, you know, which sometimes is really hard to achieve.
Yeah.
Right.
Totally.
But this is going to be like a really weird way to describe it. But as you know, the experience that I was having, because I work with artists, I work with storytellers in my day job, writers, and I see this with them also, which is, this is going to sound really odd, but I had heard this interview once. I forget the name of the guy, but there's this guy who was a famous mathematician, very polarizing figure, right? Not really accepted by academics and things like that. And a story that his son, like his son was being interviewed, and he said, the one really sort of, not tragic, but the one thing about my dad is that he sees math in such a beautiful way. And then he has to try to explain that to the world. And he can't. And it's like, and that's where it gets all messed up, right? What I saw with the sort of progression, at least just in terms of the way it was laid out and uploaded to YouTube and all of that stuff, was almost like that journey of like, it's starting in here, right? And it has to sort of bounce around. And you can almost, and then you have to learn like, what does this instrument do? What does this production thing do? What is this, you know, like the tools, right? And it's the journey of it starting in here and making its way out into like actually being expressed to the world in a way that even does justice to what's inside.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I'd say I pretty much completely agree with that. Like just like for myself too. And it's one of those things, like that's kind of like the frame of mind I feel like I've been in kind of like lately. And especially just like as an artist, when you're making your own music, it's really like, it's different when there's kind of like no limits and there's no like anything. You like each song just starts as a blank canvas or as a thought I had in a shower or like on a walk or something I just sung into my phone or something like that. But then you craft it. And even to me, sometimes like I surprise myself by some of like the end results and like sometimes revealing thoughts or feelings that I didn't know I had until the work is over. Once I found, and this is something I talk about too, is like when I produce a lot, like I'll get myself into a flow state and you probably won't hear from me. A lot of people won't hear me text back for like hours until like I'm done with that session.
Hours? I was going to say days.
Yeah. No, I just had a multi-day flow state like maybe a couple months ago, which was crazy. But just like waking up and just going back into it immediately. And just like kind of finding that whole thing. It's one of those things, it's so difficult to pinpoint, but then when you see it, you're kind of like, well, I guess so. Like you can kind of make it palatable, but also like I know that that's what I like about my own favorite artists and the people that I listen to.
I wanted to ask this, and this might sound weird, but is Elegy a different person than Elijah? And if so, who do you feel more comfortable being?
Yeah, and honestly, that's something I'm trying to figure out too. I think.
Do you know? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. And because actually, something that I've been thinking a lot, and especially the past year, as I haven't really been putting out a lot of music and putting the music out, is trying to think more about who is Elegy as a brand. And like, because, you know, being the independent artist is hard, but like, you know, people like whatever people are going to like. Right. But also like in terms of record labels and trying to build an audience and engagement and the influencer thing, which is kind of hard. Like I don't like social media at all, but
it's like the
tough.
landscape of that is it's like literally different this year than it was last year. You know, like it changes so much. How do you navigate that? How does somebody trying to do what you do, separate from the creative, because the creative it's like, right? But the other part of like getting your stuff out there, how are you working through that?
Yeah, like trying to get the stuff out there, like it's really just like I've been spending so much time reflecting on the brand and trying to be more confident and also just like defining just like what that is. And I think like now I'm a lot more sure of what that is because it feels a lot more me, and at least at the present moment. And so like something that I'm starting to accept more. And I think so to answer your question, Rob, I think like right now, like Elegy is me, because I think that Elegy is probably going to keep changing as a brand. And I think that's the truth of it as I change, you know? And I think that's pretty much the case with any artist you see their discography, and you can kind of see like the thought processes of like life they were going through, whatever happened, the progressions, you know, the events that happen and things like that. And I'm like, and it's hard to realize because when you're seeing all that stuff before you, and it kind of sometimes it does parallel to drumcore a lot when I see and think about like the people that I looked up to, and now I get to work with them and like be right alongside them, seeing like what that kind of like progression is like. And knowing that like I have to accept that right now I'm like kind of in my own part of that process of that journey, but I feel confident in knowing that where I'm at right now, that's who Elegy is. I mean, that's what it's going to be.
There's a good track record for people being authentic, just being themselves. Like Taylor Swift, right? Probably the biggest artist on the planet right now. Literally has made, you know, everything is just, she puts her heart, whatever's going on in her life, that's what goes into her music. You look at Kendrick, right? Kendrick blew up off of, you know, his first album. He had an amazing platform. To Pimp a Butterfly, he decided, all right, you want to see me? You're going to see me, right? And then Damn was was almost like what he was going through, which was how everybody was reacting to him, you know? So everything that you're talking about is what artists go through, right? And it's refreshing to hear, because you can very easily get caught up in what should I be doing? What's hot right now? What's this? What you know? And there's an element about being smart about it business wise, but when you look at all the anecdotes out there about how people make this journey, who pops, and who, you know, what keeps people, what holds people back, it usually comes down to this. It usually comes down to being yourself, you know? Even like, I don't know if you know who Miguel is, but like Miguel's music being discovered 10 years after he put it out, you know, initially. And it's just like, you can't, like every 5 minutes on the radio it's on, you know? So I think you have sort of said throughout all the time as a performer, all the time as an instructor, you understand what to stay focused on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I usually like to just kind of stay in my own lane, right, and know that as long as I'm constantly working towards the next thing for me, right, and I keep on that path of just like, all right, let's make this better, let's make that better, then by the end, whatever that means, that all this stuff you've been working towards can only go up and up and up and up, right? Like, so it kind of goes with just like whether I'm deciding to practice, and I'm trying to usually make sure like most days I at least get something done towards the ultimate goal, which is just kind of like, you know, just being me as the artist. And so as long as I'm putting something forth in that, whether that's practicing, whether that's even listening to more music, getting a mix done, doing something like that, reaching out to people, trying to collaborate more.
And you have a lot of support.
Yeah.
You know, like in within the drumline community, family is supportive of everything that you're doing. So that's great.
Yeah. Yeah. And I really appreciate that. Like it's one of those things, and it's kind of one of those things too that I feel like I have to remind myself, because also I feel like the life of being an artist is kind of like, it's tough to put yourself out there and not always see the results that you want to do, because you're working on an uphill battle all the time. And as long as like, as long as I'm being myself, and as long as I'm more confident in what I want to do next, I know that it's right for me. And that's why it's one of those things, like I've told a lot of people, I'm like, I'm probably never going to stop making music, like
That's
at
good,
least like
yeah.
I don't see it happening. Like no matter like if something doesn't pop off the way I want it to, or like if something, like if people do like something more, like I feel more confident that as long as I put my all into it, like that's the most I can do,
Well, it's like, what metrics are you following? How do you define success for you, right? Is it how you feel about it? Is it how other people feel about it? Is it some other thing? Is it becomes popular? However you define that for yourself is, I feel like you've demonstrated that you have a healthy perspective on that.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. Yeah. It's definitely one of those things. And I feel like, there's always going to be phases and dips, but just like constantly being able to remind yourself of that, like, and also just, it's a part of the journey, and everyone's figuring that out in whatever field they're going to do. Right. Like, it's just like trying to like, what's next? What can I be better at? Or like, how can I have like a different outlet for something, or like what can change? What can be better?
Just remember this. George and I get front row seats at the Hollywood Bowl when you blow up.
Absolutely. I got you guys. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I'm trying to perform live very soon here too.
Let's
That's
go.
something
That's
in the
awesome,
works. Yeah.
Have you ever thought Pulse was on America's Got Talent? What about Elegy or doing
That would be
show like that?
crazy. That would be crazy.
Or what's the other one?
The Voice.
Well, The Voice. Yes, The Voice.
An
and
American Idol.
American
Yeah,
Idol.
American Idol.
Dude, do all of them, man. Blow all of them up.
That'd be crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I should start thinking. But yeah, honestly, and just being around those environments too, like, has really given me the sort of motivation. Like, and that's, I think, honestly, kind of tying it whole circle, this trip I just had on Saudi Arabia too was another really eye-opening thing, being in the same rooms as these artists. Like I was watching, like, we had a lot of downtime in certain moments, but I chose to like just like sit in the stands a lot and just kind of like watch, like, how are these artists like rehearsing?
The preparation that
Like,
goes into it.
Yeah, like what's the preparation, and just kind of like studying and being in that environment more just kind of gave me and fueled me with more motivation to just be like, yeah, this is what I want to do. So since like I just got back this week, like I know I'm like, it's time to hit the ground running a little bit.
Yeah. I mean, it's, I would say like 20 years ago, the company that I worked at also had a huge music management side of it. And this was during the advent of like Napster and like pirating music, essentially becoming like everybody's using the internet to like, you're not going to have to go buy, CDs anymore.
The early days of streaming.
Yeah. And then how to monetize that. And like,
Yes.
what does that mean economically and all of those things. Nowadays, it's 10 times more difficult than what they were facing back then because they could at least, sort of, artists back then could at least lean on, I'm going to get this deal, right? And I'm going to tour, and all of that stuff. The double-edged sword of now is that it's much more, you have much more tools available to you, like literally on your phone, in your room, on your laptop. Like you can do almost everything you need to do, both business-wise and, creatively. But it's also like now that that's made that more accessible, right? Now the market's flooded.
Yep. Now it's harder to stand out, which is one of those things.
Right.
So, and I think like a similar thing, I tell myself, I'm just like, well, honestly, I wholeheartedly believe that at least like with me and my own experiences, it's just a different human experience.
Right.
So as long as I can put that forefront, it's going to come out different because that's just the nature of being a different person. Right.
Yeah.
So that's something that like I use as like my own personal motivation to like keep pushing past all that, because like, we truly do work in like a super saturated market and doing that stuff. And so like, it's one of those things that's like, it's going to be hard, but as long as, I stay on that path and whatever I want to do, then I feel like I will be at least being able to fulfill myself at least.
Well, we're excited to see this, whatever's coming down the pipe for you.
Thanks.
Heck yeah.
Yeah, it's
Heck yeah.
soon. Very soon.
And hopefully one of these days too, we see a signature stick.
Oh yeah, I'm not signed at all. That would be funny.
Yeah,
but yeah.
That would be cool, man. Not funny. Come on, man.
No.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
just like like a trip.
Yeah.
It'd be cool. Yeah, no, for sure.
Thank you for coming on.
Yeah.
And because again, you know, you're somebody that's visible in the activity. People see you, right? And they know of you. But I feel like in this conversation, they got to know you.
Yeah.
A little
Hopefully.
bit,
Yeah.
you know?
Hopefully.
There's little things that hopefully people can take away from the conversation that were, you know, entertaining at the very least, but also maybe be helpful, you know, as they're going on their own journeys.
Yeah. Thanks, George. Thanks, Rob. Yeah, for giving me the platform and the opportunity.
Yeah. Thank you for coming on for sure. You know, and we look forward to seeing you out in the lot with Pulse and Blue Devils and Chino Hills there.
Yeah. I'm super excited.
Heck yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right, everybody. And with that wraps it up for this episode. And we'll see you next time in the shop.
Yeah.
Night, everybody.
Night.